Ho ho ho! Ladies, gentlemen, gamers, and fellow Overwatch 2 lovers and haters. Welcome back to another Overwatch video. Today, we are going to be going over the director's take, opening up the conversation on 5v5 and 6v6. So, we have a lot of stuff to get to today. We're going to be going over this document. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff relating to Overwatch, albeit personally with me, and with this document, the state of Overwatch, what's going on, and all the shebang. So, to kind of start this off, recently, what have I been doing with Overwatch? I've been saying in my other videos, I don't really want to play it too often. You know, I've kind of been chained to Overwatch. Now, I used to play since Overwatch 1. I started with the release of Overwatch 1, which was, ironically enough, very near my birthday when I was in high school, all those years ago. Because now I'm an old fucking man. But I really liked Overwatch 1. Overwatch 1 was a phenomenon. You know, it changed a lot of stuff. It basically, I don't want to say started a genre, but it was a massive animal. Like, it was in the, I don't want to say golden era of Blizzard, but it was really a titan in its own space. It came out, it slapped its cock on the floor, and it shoved it everywhere, and people tried to copy it, even though I don't remember if Paladins came out first or if it came out after. But either way, Overwatch was a resounding success, and kind of the, I don't know if it was the flag mark or the flagship of Blizzard, but I kind of take it as the last good thing that Blizzard really made that they could be proud of. Because after that, it kind of all went downhill. But, you know, Overwatch has a history, and I left it for a while, and then I came back with Overwatch 2 for the pure fact that I like Overwatch as a game, but I really wanted to use it to improve my FPS skills. And sadly, that is no longer the case because I've become a slave to the battle pass because I'm just built like that. I usually do battle passes. And it led to me just getting on and trying to be the most efficient I can, because if I'm not, I get upset. And it basically led to me playing the game and me sort of hating it. And that's for the pure fact that I kept playing tank. So I'm kind of putting the brakes on Overwatch right now. I'm not going to finish this battle pass. One, because I'm sick of their practices, right? Overwatch 1 was really good cosmetically, even though it was loot crates, right? Even though there was loot boxes and those are controversial. I would say it's probably a lot better than what we have today, which is barely anything from the battle pass. The battle passes suck. And just what they do is they take away a lot of features, a lot of cosmetics, a lot of stuff, and then they just bring it back and call it new. Even when it's not new, it's either the same or sometimes worse, rarely ever better. But Overwatch 2, you know, I've said all these things before. Excuse me, this is kind of old news. So, what's kind of happening with Overwatch in the community? Well, a lot of old heads like me know how good it used to be and they don't like it anymore. A lot of new people, since Overwatch 2 is free to play, they just come in, they don't know how it was, so they're kind of happy and they're more than willing to spend money and support this game, which is basically, I don't want to say a cash grab, but it's a really big moneymaker, and you could tell that's what they're leaning into, right? Obviously, they're not milking us bone dry because they have improved things, but I always say this: what they've improved and where we should have been from Overwatch 1 coming into Overwatch 2, not where we should have been. We should have been way better, and we're not. But either way, eventually, the game obviously got a lot of hate because they canceled PvE, and just in general, the game feels, I don't want to say kind of boring, but for me it is because I keep going fill and keep getting tank. But the game is basically the game. It has its cookie cutter formula, and if there's nothing big to look forward to, because in this day and age, just in gaming in general, you kind of have to do what these other gaming companies do. Look at Fortnite, look at League of Legends, right? Fortnite has massive seasons, and even then it got old. So what did they do? They added Fortnite Racing, they added Fortnite Lego, Fortnite Creative, which has endless replayability because the community literally makes the game at that point. Even League of Legends, they're adding new game modes. They had new games, Legends of Runeterra, a card game. They're making the fighting game. They're working on an MMO, allegedly. You know, we have Swarm, the new game mode there. We have Arena. A lot of these other games, they don't just sit on their ass and do something repetitiously. They sort of make bigger new things over time. Even though they'll do the tedium, they'll do patches. And Overwatch's tedium is, you know, every season we get a hero, and then the next season we get a map. Then the season after that, hero. Season after that, map. And you know, there's little events here and there, but it's nothing big, and it's starting to get stale. And a lot of people, you can agree, disagree on whether the balance is good or not. I think most people would agree it's not. But the main issue comes up where it's kind of just getting old. It's getting shit. It's like, okay, we've been around the block, it's getting boring. And again, in this day and age, especially when your competition is doing way more than you, I know Overwatch isn't going to die, and especially now that they're doing collabs, they're definitely going to live further than they ever would, right? And they're going to make more money than they ever would. But the game is not that good, and I could probably tell the reason they're talking about this is either a lot of outpour from the community saying like, hey, we want 5v5 back because the game is just more fun that way, or B, because they could probably sense something is happening. They're looking at the analytics, they're looking at the numbers, and things are not going well, or at least they're not boding well for the future. But either way, regardless of why, regardless of what, regardless of the history, let's actually read what's going on. So originally I was going to read this whole thing to myself and make a video on my reaction, but instead I decided to just read it here on stream, or sorry, not on stream, on video, and just summarize it. So I'll probably read most of it out loud anyway. I'm not really going to summarize it, but let's see. So, hey there, everyone. There's been a lot of talk about 6v6 lately, and it's only intensified in recent weeks because the game sucks. Also, the new hero is pretty cool, though. Juno's really nice. But, since we posted our latest director's take and made a Twitter post promising to talk about it in the future, well, now it's the future. Oh, but not yet. So it's a pretty complex and nuanced topic, damn straight it is, and it gets to the beating heart of what makes the game tick. Our players have different opinions and preferences about the ideal number of players in Overwatch match, and so does our team. So this is kind of the difficult thing to go on, right? This is where originally Overwatch was 6v6. And obviously that came with its issues and that came with its positives. But one of the issues, which thankfully I wasn't there for, was GOATS meta, was Brig meta, right? These things were apparently really bad, and I think that's more of a failing on the Overwatch team not balancing it correctly, more than it being a failing on 6v6, because from what I heard, from how bad it was, especially for Tracer players, it's like they kind of just let it go on for too long for no reason. That's their fault. That's not anyone else's fault. That's not 6v6's fault. It's their fault for allowing it for so long. So the main issue I saw when they changed from 6v6 to 5v5, obviously it was a big shakeup. People were excited about it, but the biggest thing is you're losing a player. Like if you had a whole squad to play Overwatch just friend wise, now someone's getting kicked out. Competitive wise, someone's getting axed from their job, even though competitive is a very small subset. It changed up a lot of things, and I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse. Everything from what I hear, and this is obviously where it's biased, but at that point anything can be biased. You know, you usually are going to hear the negative more than the positive, but I don't hear a lot of good things about 5v5. And I keep hearing people want 6v6 back. And honestly, the only thing I'll say on this is I don't mind either. I just really want to go not fill and just go DPS. I want to practice my aiming. But the other thing I'm sad about with 5v5 is instead of there being two tanks, now there's one tank. So you don't get the tank interactions anymore unless you play like open queue, which you know they don't have roles. There's role queue and there's open queue. So unless you're playing open queue, you're not going to hear the tank interactions, which is kind of sad. But either way, so we're a microcosm of the broader community and discuss this internally. I'm hoping this piece will serve as an introduction to our own discussion and a jumping off point to engage with all of you. I'm assuming by the end of this, they're going to say, hey, we're interested. Hey, we might test it, but we're not going to do it. It's going to be, I'll be shocked if they actually go through with 5v5. I don't think they'll ever, or sorry, 6v6, bringing it back. But that's the name of the game, right? Historically speaking, and I say this all the time, I even said it in this video, what Overwatch 2 does is all the changes from Overwatch 1 that they took away, they bring back and they call it a new feature. It is actually asinine. It pisses me off to no extent because there's people out there who either A, don't know that this was the case. This is how it was in the previous days, right? The on fire system is the main one. I forgot what else, but mainly the on fire system is the one that's like really egregious, where it's like, oh, this is a new system we're bringing in. No, it's not. It's the old system, but it's slightly worse. It's like they always do this, and I remembered more of the examples in the past. Now I don't remember because I don't really care anymore. But Overwatch always does this shit. They take away old stuff and then they bring it back, and I don't understand why. I really don't. But either way, let's see. But yeah, no, I'd be surprised if they bring back 6v6 and take away 5v5. I feel like 6v6 might be its own new thing if they are bringing it back, but that's rare. I think right now they're just saying, hey, we're thinking about it, we're going to have a discussion about it, and we might test something with it. I think that's the extent of what we'll see. But let's see if I'm right. I'd also like to set a few expectation and ground rules. Firstly, it's pretty long. Creators are going to lose their voices reading this one aloud. Oh, lovely. That's me. If you like a TLDR, the what's next section should suffice. Secondly, I'm not here to tell you what you ought to like or what's empirically better. Yeah, because at the end of the day, the stats are the stats, but they don't account for the full story. At the end of the day, and I always say this with my league stuff, A perfectly balanced game is a perfectly unfun game. It's kind of similar to what Lifeweaver says. A perfect world is a perfect prison. So this is where if everything is perfectly balanced, it's not really fun anymore. Like you need to have some things be unbalanced to actually be fun, or at least funner, even though that's not a real word. But anyway, so yeah, this is where they're not wrong. Where empirically it doesn't matter too much, but it does give some insight. This is a game, and your preference for fun is relative to your own tastes. True, but this is where they're gonna prefer the taste of the many over the few because that's who they're trying to placate. That's who they're trying to get money from. The masses, not the few. That's why it's not balanced around pros most of the time. Anyway, lastly, there are years of decisions that affect such a fundamental piece of Overwatch. Yeah, just like the years of work they put into PvE. Some of you might be intimately aware of these, while others might not. Yeah, the new players. Before diving in, I'd like to set the stage and give some context on some of the larger changes to the game and ultimately culminated, Jesus, in the 5v5 format we have today. So, historical context. Excuse me. There have been 3 large format changes to OWs. The first happened shortly after the game launched. This was Hero Limits. Oh yeah, because you could pick 2 Torbjorns. I forgot. I used to do that. Before there was this, there could be any number of a particular hero on one team. So you could go like 6 Winstons, 6 Zarya, 6 whatevers. You could have 6 Genjis or 6 Reinhardts, like they're saying. If memory serves right, the winner of Team 4's first international tournament was 1 Winston and 5 Zens. We called it Quinston. Wow. And there was no cap of healing on Zen's orbs. That was amazing. During early development, it was necessary to have duplicate heroes per team. Our first, well, yeah, also there wasn't enough heroes too, but our first core combat milestone only had 4 heroes. Wow. As the roster grew, this was no longer necessary, and it also introduced issues. Overwatch heroes have very distinct kits with impactful abilities, and that's very true. That still holds up, I think, mainly to today. Even though some heroes are kind of overlapping at some points, they're pretty much still pretty distinct. So, that's correct. Stacking abilities could be fun, but it poses challenges for balancing and many of the other abilities in the game. True. People reference double barrier, but back then you could have 6. Yeah. Imagine cycling 6 immortality fields. The number of team comps and strategies was huge, but that's not good for balance. The variety was great, but we didn't feel like we could ever truly balance the game without severely watering down our heroes, which is true. And then they made the choice to limit heroes, which was a little controversial, but I think overall a great choice, personally. And this essentially solved the issue of ability stacking, but it did have a few side effects. It traded some of the creativity for a more consistent and balanced experience, so it took away some of the fun. It also took away, obviously, some choice from players. If someone wanted to play Tracer, but you were already Tracer, then you got fucked. Squeeze me. A theme of this and future decisions was limiting match variety as well as player freedom and creativity in order to create a more balanced, consistent, and competitive experience, because they also want to eventually franchise and make more money. Remember this point because we'll touch on it a few more times in this piece. The hero limit rule was a great decision, and we would make it again, and I agree with them here. The other 2 large format changes have a lot of positive benefits, but is not so clear-cut. So the second change was open queue to roll queue. This was insane. So this limited you further. So there was teams where you could just not have a healer. You could just have like a bunch of tanks. You could go all tanks. I think this change was probably, in my mind, the most controversial, at least to me. But either way, before roll queue, there was obviously no enforced 2-2-2 team comps. So, you didn't have to have 2 tanks like I just said. But open queue, teams had the freedom still. So at least they kept it in, right? And that's, I think, where they're going to go with if they're going to do anything with 5v5. They'll bring it back, but 6v6, god damn it. They'll bring it back, but they won't completely remove 5v5. But either way, there are quite a few problems that roll queue intended to address. Prior to implementing roll queue, there was a stark imbalance in number of people playing each role, so people probably didn't want to play healer. Excuse me. Damage was by far and still is today the most popular role, and tank was by far the least popular, and I still think it's like that today too. In fact, seeing matches with 5 or even 6 damage players was not uncommon. And back then, Reaper didn't have his healing passive either. Well, he did, but it was through souls, through killing, not through doing damage. But either way, the role imbalance frequently led to wildly imbalanced matches between teams. The game played better when heroes from all 3 roles were selected. Yeah, and that's how it's intended, too. The disparity caused social issues as players would try to pressure others into playing tank or support roles. So basically making them bitches. It made balancing heroes more difficult. They couldn't balance around a certain ratio for them. And it made introducing new heroes difficult because everyone wanted DPS. And every hero kit had to take into consideration hundreds of different team comps. So again, they just restricted it more for them. The move into role queue was aimed to mitigate these challenges. Moving to role queue solved many of these problems and add some additional benefits to the game as well. With role queue in place, matchmaking is based on skill within a given role, which is good. Not just skill overall. Some players have wildly different skill ratings per role, which is true. So now they can filter for that. So the ability to matchmake around set roles provides a big measurable boost in match quality. True. Excuse me. Role queue also solidified the identity of each role, and the fantasy of doing each role's job became clearer. Yeah, if you're the healer, you're the bitch. The role queue system did have some downsides, and obviously it was longer queue times because no one wanted to play healer. Prior to role queue, the matchmaker just needed to find 12 players of similar skill, put them together after role queue. Now it needs each role, obviously. So now I'm just gonna like zoom through this. Let's see. So it's supposed to be so good. Okay. Yeah, so they're just saying queue times went up because certain people didn't want to play certain roles as usual. So the team tries to address this imbalance in various ways. We introduced a priority pass system that give players who played 2 demand roles, aka tank, a shorter queue time when they switch to damage. So basically, you have to get your work out of the way. You have to eat your vegetables first before you have the dessert. This had a positive effect for several weeks, but its influence quickly faded. So then there was things to reward this. You know, you would give them a bunch of XP, but that didn't really care because that didn't really matter. I mean, you know, loot crates are good, but the token system kind of made up for that too. And a lot of people stacked a lot of crates. But either way, damage queue times drifted a bit lower over time. Open queue competitive. Okay, cool. So there were additional drawbacks with role queue. So let's see. So obviously they took away variety and player freedom. Team comps were now locked into 2-2-2. This was another step to more consistent experience, but sometimes consistency can start to feel samey, which is how I feel. It feels like a lot more now with 5v5. I feel even more samey with this one, more so than 6v6 personally. But there was some pretty exciting metas in pre-roll queue world, and swapping to a hero of a different role mid-match was often a bigger change and more exciting than swapping to one of the same role. Also, you know what they could do? They might let you swap roles. Wait, maybe you'll have to like trade the person or something? Who knows? Like hero limits role queue took away a part of the freedom in selecting heroes instead of the base of Overwatch, but I wonder if the success of it as cut and dry as that of hero limits. Could there be an in-between version that softens the original problem without completely solving them, and also isn't quite as restrictive as the current role queue system? A bit more on that later. So, what's the third major change? So, obviously, the third major change was going from 6v6 to 5v5. So, they're going to go over why they switched to 5v5, queue times after they switched, and what they think about 6v6 going backwards. So, what do they think about switching to 5v5? There were a lot of reasons behind it. Number one, they needed to justify putting the 2 there since PvE wasn't there. So, when we launched Overwatch 2 and lied about the PvE, we talked about the greater individual agency that players could have. Overwatch is a team sport and requires players to rely on each other, which is a recipe for disaster most of the time in public queues. Either way, this was even more the case previously, and the game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. That's true. More people leads to more discord. This was even more the case previously, and the game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. That's true. Many times fights in 6v6 couldn't resolve until ultimates came online. I feel like that a little bit now still. Not as much, though, but yeah. But yeah, they're not wrong here. Until ultimate combos would be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of shields. But they kind of fixed this. So this is the main issue, right? A lot of the tanks before the switch to 5v5 had decently different kits. And this is where they pretty much changed the whole tank role, right? Overall. Obviously, they made Doomfist a tank. They switched to Reese's kit. But overall, they kind of, in a way, sort of lessened shielding. I feel like a lot less shielding in the game than there was before. Because number one, there's not 2 tanks. But number two, they also took away some shields from some people, like namely Orisa, back in the day. Excuse me. But they're not wrong. Back in the day, if you were soldier, good luck getting through all the shields. You just had to sit there. That's why like Sim was the best shield like cracker. It was so good. But either way. And Torb when he had the level 3 turret. Wow, that's so long ago. Either way, so ultimate combos could be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of mitigation supported by a high uncontested healing output. I feel like 6v6 could work potentially in today's age with how the tanks work now. But again, this is where Overwatch might not immediately do it or might not do it all because it's going to be a big undertaking. They're going to have to change a lot of stuff back to like, I don't want to say how things were, but they're going to have to do a whole balancing pass again, at the very least on the tank roll, because that's the main thing that's changing. Imagine they're like, okay, you still have 1 tank, but now you have 3 DPS. You know how crazy that would be? But either way, Well, the 6v6 could have really high highs but really low lows. True, one of the design goals of 5v5 was to raise the floor. Nice. Overwatch 2 has greater emphasis on FPS gameplay. Yeah, unless you're like me and you're trying to do the battle pass and you get fill, and then you're just playing tank. There's less damage mitigation in CC, which is true, and players get to shoot at enemies more, which is good. Crowd control could take players out of the game for extended periods of time, especially when they were chained back to back. A 5-second Sombra hack may freeze under primary fire. Brig Bash and Sleep Orisa Halt Sigma Rock could happen consecutively to one player. Yeah, if they're not dead by the end of it. Typically, a tank who could often survive this onslaught, at least in game. Their real life mental health was another story. True. Damage heroes complained that their role was least impactful relative to the strength of super powerful tank synergies and support heroes. Pretty true. The emphasis on ability, cooldown management, ult tracking, shooting barriers instead of players, which was a big fucking issue. I also hated that. And not big enough timing windows to just shoot enemies and get eliminations were all factors that basically made them think, let's go with 5v5 and let's rework tanks. I think the reworking tank was the bigger thing, honestly. But anyway, support heroes also had to focus almost exclusively on healing since there were bigger team health pools, which is true. In 5v5, they have more agency to add some damage or duel other heroes, which is kind of true. You also got to remember, back in the day, people used to play Mercy by just hiding and then team rezzing. That was the whole way you played Mercy. Excuse me. But anyway, tank synergy wasn't always fun. It slowed the game down and stabilized it, but it absolutely grounded to a halt other times. People point at the double shield meta as an example of this, which was disgusting. It wasn't just double shields, though. The ability to stack a very defensive heavy lineup... Oh, hold up. I need that. A very defensive heavy lineup, especially in game modes that required a team to push through a small choke, caused a lot of matches to feel like basically you were stonewalled at the Wall of China. The game is now faster and it doesn't typically stall, which is pretty true, but it's wildly back and forth now. Feels like there's more room to move around the map without the need to earn every inch of it. 5v fights are often less focused on moving around in a death ball formation, and there's more room to basically flank and move off on your own. Nice. While 6v6 can have high moments, it's also hard to follow. Tracking 9 other players is easier than 11. And why are they saying 9? What the fuck? And there are fewer visual effects on screen, especially during big fights. Overwatch is a pretty demanding game, and moving to 5v5 made it more cognitively manageable. Somewhat true. Lastly, one of the biggest benefits was dramatically reduced queue times. So this is where they're going to try and justify it. But again, I think for the most part, obviously we want the best of both worlds. We want low queue times, fun games. But I really think, from everything I've seen and heard as a gamer throughout my years, that people would prefer a little bit, not crazy, a little bit longer queue times for great quality games. Can you always do that? No. Is it a guarantee? No. But on average, I think most people would agree to that. Either way. As you can see, the shift to 5v5 dramatically reduced queue times for players in all roles, and most notably the damage role. Nice. I don't really care about this chart. But either way, the biggest factor driving the difference between Overwatch and Overwatch 2 queue times is the ratio of players queuing for each role. Because there's one tank player now. Which again, no one really wants to play tank. We hear players speculate that low queue times are a result of not enough players playing Overwatch. See, and this is where either they need to rework the role, make it more fun, or I don't know what other fix you could do, but it kind of sounds like you're providing a band-aid to the problem. And obviously that's not the only reason they took away the other tank, right? Obviously all the other reasons they listed here. But if one of the big reasons is, hey, there's a long queue time for it, why is that? Oh, it's because the role's unfun. Okay, well then, and just instead of putting the band-aid and taking one player away so it's faster, since you only need 2 instead of 1, why don't you just make the role fun so people want to play it? If you can't do that, you're incompetent at your job, you need to be removed, right? Excuse me. Because there's been times where tank has been fun. Like, tank isn't always terrible. As much as I shit on it, I do sometimes like playing it. But, you know, it's a really hard thing to balance, I'm not gonna lie. But either way, that's not my job, that's not our job. We're the players, we want to have fun, not worry about these things. So let's see where we're at. So instead of that, relative to other roles, players generally queue tank less, leading to longer wait times for all while we wait for a tank here to be free to find a proper match. So in practice, the actual ratio of players queuing for tank damage and support is much closer to the current 1-2-2 than the previous 2-2-2. As a result, 5v5 role queue format better mirrors the actual player interest in each role. So basically, they're confirming that no one wanted to play tank. Oh my god, which is why when you fill 95% of the time, you get fucking tank. It's so stupid. Either way, the The sharp drop off in queue times in October of 2022 is when Overwatch 2 along with 5v5 shipped. The queue times of all heroes dropped and are now much shorter than they were in the 6v6 world. This is almost all because the game required one less tank because no one wanted to play tank. If you look at the current queue times, you can see that there's still a lack of tanks compared to the other roles. Just flipping the switch and returning to 6v6 would likely cause a return to previous queue times or worse. So that's a little hint there that, again, they're probably not going to go back. Regardless of the amount of players in game, queue times are always reflective of how many people are queued per role. The main driver of increased queue times is the ratio of players queued in each role. So, since there are less players queuing as tanks, queues would likely go back to the way they were before. So again, they're trying to justify it. Just make tank fun. Don't make tank ass. I don't get it. So, the game started its life... So thoughts on 6v6 here. The game started its life with 6 players in each team. I discussed why we moved away from that, but that doesn't mean it's without any merit. There are moments in madness that could happen with 12 players in a match that just don't quite coalesce when there are 10. It's almost too much to keep track of, so before they said 9, I wonder if that was a mistake. Either way, it was too much to keep track of at times, but that was part of the charm. There are big moments in Overwatch 2, but they don't quite have the same chaotic, over-the-top feeling to them. True. Part of the cast allowed players to feel less pressure in the match. There was an extra player to take up a bit of the slack for someone performing poorly, and since that player was a tank, they had quite a bit of impact. There were a lot more hit points and defensive capabilities to burn through, which had a stabilizing effect on gameplay. Teams would fold a bit slower than they do now. We went over some of the issues Tank Synergy had, but having the two of them allowed one to focus on protecting their backline while the other one held ground or pushed the enemy team, which is pretty true. This is very true. You had one defensive one, one kind of aggressive one. Either way, the tank role had a lot of depth in understanding how to work with the other tank on the team, which is another added complexity. So again, if your team sucked, it really sucked. If it was good, it was really good. It was just more accentuated. 6v6 accentuated things more. This part of the mastery curve took a long time to learn. For the small groups of people devoted to it, this was part of its allure. But that's the issue right there. What they said, it was the small group of people. Overwatch is for the masses, because that's who opens their wallets. Either way, you mentioned the difficulty in balancing tank for 6v6, but the past year and a half has shown us that there are issues with balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced, which is not good. But when one of them becomes a powerful outlier like Mauga, they can be felt strongly in the world of one tank. Yeah, because at that point, if they do nothing, your tank role is useless, the role's sacked. If they do too much, the tank role's overbearing. It's very hard to find a balance for these things, in general. And finally, what's next? This is honestly the main thing I could have read, but I want to go over everything. Give my little insight on it. Which costed us about, oh my god, 27 minutes. Holy shit. Either way. Alright, that was a lot of setup. They've put more effort into this than any essay they wrote in college. Wow. So where do we go from there? At the end of the day, we want to make the game that players want to play. And a lot of people are asking for 5v5. Because of the challenges mentioned previously, we are focusing on... Or sorry, 6v6, my bad. I keep saying 5v5. Because of the challenges mentioned previously, we are focused on making 5v5 the best experience that it could be. However, because we operate as a service for our players, they essentially have to listen to us. We always remain open-minded to reevaluating decisions based on your actions and feedback to give you the best game experience we can. Rather than introduce a disruptive, permanent change to the game, we'd rather explore the space further and make changes based on that exploration. With that said, and let's get to the important part here, we're looking at running a series of events to try out different core team composition formats in Overwatch 2. So this is where, like I said, one of the options is they're probably just going to test it out slowly but surely and feel how it is. The community has just once or twice suggested a test, went up with various forms of 6v6 in the game in order to gauge the results. Realistically, this already exists in, I don't want to say arcade, but in custom games, obviously, right? But it's getting more popular too, so maybe that's why they couldn't even ignore it. Either way. So they agree. Based on our feedback, they're exploring how to test different forms. This is taking some time, however, for reasons that may not be readily apparent, aka balance, probably. The first and honest largest reason is that they need to do this in a way that allows the game to have optimized technical performance. Oh. They're talking about frame rate and memory constraints. With 12 players in a match, there have been quite a few upgrades and additions to Overwatch 2 that have an impact on performance of the game. See, I don't understand how this makes sense, though, because, again, there's custom games with way more than, I think, 12 players in the game. I could be wrong on that, though, but I feel like there is. At least 12. These range from new features like allied outlines and enabling healer vision, the addition of more technically demanding hero kits, as well as visual upgrades to UI, heroes, and maps. In a 6v6 setting, these upgrades can have significant impacts for our players, causing the game to underperform on older systems. This is sad because obviously where's the cutoff for what an older system is? Who decides that? But at the end of the day, we're in 2024. Now, granted, that also means economically we're worse off than the previous year. That's undoubtedly true based on inflation and everything. But, if you got a shit can toaster, you're kind of going to suffer anyway. Sorry, but not sorry. Either way, Overwatch is a fast paced game, and maintaining a game that runs smoothly across all our platforms is important because they want money. While limited time tests could arrive sooner, the team is still investigating exactly how long it would take to permanently increase performance across the game. This would be a large effort that would most likely take at least several seasons to accomplish. Oh lord. Another issue, and one that still gives Aaron Keller over here anxiety about opening this Pandora's box, is what to do with queue times. So this is going to be hard because if they have tests like this, right, will this further fragment the player base? Because there's times, right, where I've played Overwatch at certain times of the night, where I stream live at Twitch TV/Tecnics channel, and I'm playing Overwatch, and it takes fucking forever to find a game. Forget about arcade. Arcade is even worse. Like, arcade, pack it up, go next. I've had queue times 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes sometimes. 5 isn't too bad. 10 is ridiculous. 15, like, I just give up. That's longer than a fucking game. I'm going to be in queue longer than the game. And that's arcade. And obviously, arcade isn't the main thing. But for a live service game, for as big as Overwatch was, to not have people on at all times of the day, to where I can't find a game in 15 minutes on arcade, it's a little ridiculous, and it kind of shows again sort of where the game's going. The game is getting, I don't want to say dying, but at the late stages of the night it kind of feels like that way. So if they introduce 6v6, it's going to fragment the player base even more, where it might cause a lot of issues even with the core 5v5. Forget about arcade might just straight up die at certain times of the day, but they're not going to get rid of that. But either way, where was I? So there's no guarantee it will work. Okay, the team was not able to solve this issue previously, so they have no clue how to fix it. They have some ideas now. Oh, never mind. There's no guarantee that they will work. Is there a world where people are willing to live with long queue times to play this format? Maybe. But that's a pretty risky move to make. True. We also have tens of millions of new players that only played 5v5. We want to be openly mindful to not frustrate those who like the game as it is today. Excuse me. So again, this is just more leading to what I thought. They're just going to have both, but have 6v6 as a test run. Either way, the outcome of these tests will be to give us a lot of valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run the test for a few weeks to engage interest from the community. And this is kind of what they did recently with the Sombra hacking quick play thing, where they introduced new passives for all the roles. You could like choose from 3 passives. That was like a little test for it, and that was only 2 days, but they're like throwing shit at the wall at this point. They're just trying to see what sticks. Either way, we measured the impact it had on other experiences in Overwatch 2, like 5v5 arcade, so it's going to kill arcade, I'm pretty sure. We take the lessons from this playtest to see what we can learn about the mode from within the game ecosystem and for the future of Overwatch 2. We would reflect carefully on the learnings from whatever test run they do and explore how to best give players what's being asked for, because it's all about us, not the shareholders. Whether that's the world of 5v5, 6v6, or even both, it's the future for us to figure out. I will be very shocked if 6v6 actually comes out, because based on what they said, it sounds like queue times are going to be abysmal. I think they might just still let it there, but it's going to be so painful that it's going to really suck for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people are just going to be corralled to 5v5 anyway, if they just keep it in. But let's see. Anyway, I'm going to jump on a soapbox for a moment. When you look at the changes to Overwatch since its inception, it's clear that many of those have reduced some of the variety within an Overwatch match. We get feedback from some of the players that Overwatch can feel the same from game to game, which is somewhat true, but if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do, you do. Obviously, there has to be some level of variance. The more variance there is, within a limit, the more people will like it. It can't be nearly the same every game. That'd be terrible. But again, it's all about finding the sweet spot. That's the hard part. While much of this gets attributed to 5v5, we feel that there's more to play here. Besides running experiments with 6v6, we like to run some that re-examine the ways we tried solving previous problems. And I think, again, that's what they were doing with the Sombra hacking quick play thing. Specifically with the goal of bringing some of the freedom back to Overwatch match without the severity of issues that accompanied it. For instance, we think there could be other ways of putting a team together that aren't quite as rigid as a set composition, but not as loose as open queue. We'll be running at least one quick play hacked based on this idea in Season 13. So again, the Sombra thing, that just happened. There's some gotchas to this direction, but after reading 400 pages of this blog, I hope you're all able to see that there are trade-offs to many of the decisions that go into the game and into any game really, and they're not wrong. To wrap it up for now, finally, Your feedback has driven us both our inspiration and commitment to testing new ideas in game. We want to be super thoughtful on how to implement these new ideas into the live game because there are millions of players who jump into Overwatch each season, but for some reason arcade feels dead at some time. So, millions of players that are new, but are they going to stay? Who knows? And we want anything we put in game to benefit the community as a whole. Ultimately, the Overwatch team wants to continue building the game that you want to play season after season. This blog, or thesis rather, is just the start of this conversation. This isn't the last time we're going to be getting into 5v5 or 6v6, and we can't wait to share more details or plans in the future. I expect this to come out, if anything, at the end of the year, if not beginning of next year, if they're going to do a test, but who knows. In closing, we appreciate you so much and your money. We love seeing your passion and dedication to the game. Team 4, what the fuck? And the Overwatch community. The team hears you, we see you, and we're incredibly thankful to be on this ride with all of you. Can't wait to share more in the upcoming months, and let's make a great game together. Aaron Keller. And there it is. So I fully imagine that some of the Overwatch community is going to stroke this, and this is kind of what I said about Overwatch 1, right? Overwatch 1 didn't get updated for so fucking long that any single change was grabbed, its pants were pulled down, and it was jacked off and sucked off at the same time. It was given the full treatment. And that's because when you starve people and you give them shit, they're going to think it's food. This is where, again, right? This happens again and again. I don't even understand. Like, it's really a meme. It's really a hardcore joke. Where it's like, I'm really glad I'm starting to rip out of the talons that are digging in me of Overwatch. And it's sad because it's a fun game. There's times where it's fun and I don't mind getting on every so often. But the Battle Pass adding in was like one of the worst things they did to me, man. Like, I swear to God. Thankfully, I'm ripping its talons out. But it's a fun game. I've played it for a while. But the main thing is, Overwatch 2 doesn't make sense, right? The PvE was the big selling point. That never came. They add in things that are shells of it, which are okay, but, they're little, like, weenie things. But it's like, almost everything, even with the competitive stuff, they changed competitive back to how it was in Overwatch 1. Nearly identical, maybe the same, if not a little bit worse, usually, right? The rank system, the on fire system, where again they took these things out and it's like, why? They changed them just to feel like they were doing something new because they had to show something on the project. They can't just copy and paste the same thing for Overwatch 1. So they're like, hey, we had to do something and it's new. It's not better, but it's new. And then later on down the line, they're always going to go back and just be like, okay, so we're slowly going to add this thing in from Overwatch 1 again because that's when we actually knew what we were doing or when it was actually good. And we're going to hope it sticks and we're going to call it new. It's so frustrating. And there's so many times with this game where that happens where I've just gotten sick of it. I've gotten sick of the game because, again, I have played it for a long time and it's still a good game. It's a free game, which is even better, right? But the monetization is just annoying. It's fucking painful. It's so bad. There's so many aspects as an old player where you've probably had your fill and it's gotten not better but worse or stayed the same. And it's just like it's done. Like, what is this? It's nonsense. Like, we're really going back to Overwatch 1 in almost every aspect, and there's some new things here and there, right? The biggest new thing I could think of is, oh, we have the new green weapons instead of just the gold ones we can buy. Whoop-de-doo, I could have booger green instead of fucking piss gold. Wow. But the on fire system's back, the rank system's back. It's like all these things, it's like, what the fuck? And now they're bringing 6v6 back, allegedly. Excuse me. And by bringing it back, I mean they're going to test it and they're going to see what people want. But this is the hard part where it's like, I don't even know if the people know what they want. And I don't even know if Overwatch could deliver on that. It's just like, it's just, I'm honestly just fed up with the game. Again, really glad I'm not that much into it. I still play it occasionally here and there, but the cosmetics in the Battle Pass suck ass. The game's just money grubbing past what it used to be. But it used to have the initial price tag, so it makes sense. But it's just, overall, it's just like, Overwatch is just too much, man. It's just like a drama queen. I'm fucking done with this shit. I'll look at it every so often, laugh, play a little bit, get on it, haha, cool. But I think I'm successfully and gladly moving away from it because I got other things to play. At the end of the day, that's what you gotta do, Put your money where your mouth is, or hopefully where it's not. And, don't support their game. Obviously, if you want to play it, you could play it. If you want to pay money for it, support it, buy it. But this is just what I'm doing. I've never paid money for Overwatch 2, thankfully, and I hope I never do unless the game becomes good and it's worth it. Because they try to swindle you, man. They really do. But overall, I'm not really surprised by any of this. This was mainly just a big history lesson more than anything. It was more nonsensical. But it was nice to read. You know, it reminded me of some nice memories, and it kind of shows again they're just throwing shit at the wall because they need to do something. Like the way Overwatch is going, it's not really going to improve. I'm pretty sure unless they bring back actual PvE, Overwatch has already peaked. It's past its peak. There's no way. Unless they do something huge, there's no way like it's not past its prime. And at this point, they either are trying their hardest to maintain it or make it fizzle out more slowly because the collabs can only do so much, right? That'll bring back people momentarily, and that will be enough for a long time. But again, with this day and age of competition, especially with the new Marvel game coming out, and that could be another reason why Overwatch is just throwing shit at the wall and trying to go back to their golden days of 6v6, which worked, because they now actually have something to put a fire even more up their ass than their declining player base, which I have no clue if it's actually declining or not. But at the very least, competition's always good. The Marvel game coming out looks a lot better. Who knows if that's going to survive either. I have different opinions on that, but we'll leave it here for now. Not surprised by this. I knew this would be one of the options, most likely too. And, you know, they're just going to test out. They're going to see how it is, and if people like it, they'll add it in as a separate mode, but they're not going to get rid of 5v5. Plainly obvious to me, they're not going to get rid of 5v5. And I think this might blow up in their face because this is really going to fragment a lot of people. Because like they said, a lot of new people never played 6v6. They don't know old Overwatch. And again, there's already times where the player base is already kind of declining, especially at night, where you can't even get an arcade game. If you're an arcade-only player, good fucking luck. Eat shit. So it's like, you know, I could see more potential bad than good from this. It really seems like a sinking ship that is just pushing out money as it's sinking. And it's sinking very slowly, and it's never going to fully sink. It's not the Titanic, right? It's not going to split in half, go into the ocean, never to be seen again. It's just going to go slowly more under the water and then just stay there. And then slowly go under and then just stay there too, but it's never going to sink fully unless they really blow a hole in their fucking hull. But either way, that's it. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'm going to go stream. You can watch me at Twitch TV/Tecnics channel. Ooh, ooh, ooh.